Give my mom a credit. She'll clean your toilet, shouted the alien child. Then a human said, yes.
Tarnax, for had been a resource colony, a mining grid riddled with domes and drills and regulation towers. But that was before the collapse. Now it was a salvage zone. The air filters hadn't worked in years. Wind carried metal dust that scratched the eyes and turned skin raw. Scavenger groups, trade parasites, and slaver syndicates had all claimed pieces of what remained. The old commerce district, once structured, had turned into a cluster of jury-rigged tents, broken market stalls, and reinforced vendor crates set up on uneven terrain. Among it all, a child stood on a cracked utility crate, yelling over the buzz of malfunctioning street panels and haggling voices. Give my mom a credit. She'll clean your toilet. Just one credit. Please. Laneri's throat hurt. Her chest tightened after every sentence, but she shouted again. She had to. No one stopped. One merchant glanced at her and rolled his eyes. A pair of slavers laughed and nudged each other. A woman pretending to fix a plasma torch clicked her tongue and turned up her audio filter. No one cared. The girl was barefoot. Her oversized shirt had once been a man's tunic, now frayed at the edges and dragging behind her knees like a cape. Her violet skin was dusty, her white hair tied into a weak knot that kept slipping free. She was thin. You could see her ribs when she turned sideways. Behind her, her mother sat on the edge of a heat exhaust vent, trying not to draw attention. Valerie kept her head low. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't move unless she had to. Her clothing was nearly gone. A translucent Zyrene domestic shift that had once symbolized beauty and utility. It was now held together by threads and stubbornness. She had tied strips of thermal cloth around her calves as makeshift protection, but the cuts on her legs still reopened when she moved too fast. Her long white hair was dirty, clumped at the ends. Her fingers were folded tightly into her palms. She hated hearing her daughter beg, but stopping her hadn't worked. They'd been walking the outer stalls for days. Nobody gave out credits anymore. Not to aliens. Not to women. Not to a species that was being picked off by labor auctions and syndicate trades. The Zyrene were considered low value on Tarnax, for desirable only for entertainment or janitorial work. Valerie had been a domestic artisan once. She used to craft interior harmonics for sleep pods and medical units. Micro designs that made humans sleep better, breathe deeper. That was 4 years ago. Her partner had vanished during a corporate raid. The engineering hub had shut down. She and Laneri had wandered since, getting by however they could, hiding from the kinds of men who smiled too easily. They had no mission anymore. Survival was the only objective, and even that was starting to feel optional. Then, from the crowd, someone finally stopped. He was human. Tall, broad, maybe late 30s. His clothes were worn but solid. Thick salvage pants, an old black tank top, and a cracked leather utility vest. Dust covered his boots. His dark hair fell to his jaw, slightly tangled but clean. He wasn't armed in a visible way, but his posture said he didn't need to be. Herman Rayner didn't come to the market for charity. He needed wiring for his heater, maybe another fluid reservoir for his sink system. He lived alone in an old utility bay at the edge of Sector 4, outside syndicate patrol zones, just far enough to be left alone. But when he heard the voice, high, hoarse, small, something in him didn't move on. He watched the girl. She was maybe 5. Her voice had that panic that comes from saying the same thing too many times without getting a response. She wasn't crying. She wasn't whining. She was pleading. And behind her, the woman sat still like someone bracing for something worse. He walked over slowly, crouched to the girl's eye level. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him carefully, not answering right away. "Laneri," she said. Herman nodded. "That your mother?" She turned and pointed. "She's good. She works fast. She doesn't steal." Valerie looked up finally. Her eyes locked onto his. Not hopeful, suspicious. Herman looked back at her. "You clean?" Valerie nodded once. Not a word. She was too proud to say anything. Or maybe just too used to being ignored. He stood up and rubbed the back of his neck. A few slavers at a nearby vendor had started watching. He didn't like the way they grinned. All right, he said, but only if you both come with me. You don't work alone. Valerie's jaw clenched. She hesitated, looking at Laneri. The girl whispered, Please, Mama. Let's go. Valerie pushed herself up slowly. Her knees cracked. Her shift clung to her thighs as she stood, and her ankles wobbled slightly before she caught herself. She didn't ask questions. She didn't thank him. She just followed. Herman led them along the edge of the trade zone, past shuttered storage bays and a collapsed fusion tap, until they reached a reinforced metal access tunnel. Inside, it was dark and echoing but dry. At the far end sat his home, an old maintenance station turned into a livable space. A power core hummed in the back, flickering occasionally. One cot, one heater, a shelf of tools, a portable toilet with a curtain, 2 crates stacked to make a table, a coil of backup wiring, and silence. He stepped aside and pointed. Floor's yours. Food locker's there. Don't touch the tools. Laneri looked around with wide eyes. To her, this was a palace. Valerie stepped in slowly, not touching anything. Her gaze swept across every corner. No restraints, no chains, no cameras. She didn't relax, but she didn't run either. Herman set down his bag and opened a can of hydromeal, poured it into a metal bowl, pushed it toward them wordlessly. Valerie knelt and handed it to Laneri first. She waited until the girl was halfway done before tasting it herself. No one talked. Later that night, Valerie began cleaning without being asked. She moved quietly. She didn't announce it. She just began wiping down the corners of the floor with a torn rag she found near the sink. Her body moved stiffly, like she was used to working through pain. Herman watched from the cot, expression unreadable. She was wearing his shirt now, one of the old sleeveless ones he'd left in a drawer. It hung down past her hips. She had tied it at the waist with a piece of wire cord. Her legs were bare except for the linen wrappings. The shirt shifted as she leaned forward, revealing smooth, faded purple skin beneath. Herman didn't stare, but he noticed everything. The care she took with even the dirtiest corners. The way her shoulders tensed when he walked by. The way she seemed ready to freeze if he said the wrong word. But he didn't say anything. He just adjusted the power coil to stabilize the heater and let her work. That night, the 3 of them lay in silence. Herman gave Laneri the cot. He took the floor near the door. Valerie laid out a padded cloth near the heater and curled up tightly, facing the wall. For a long time, no one said anything. Then Laneri spoke. Mister, yeah, if I die before Mama, will you still feed her? Herman blinked. Valerie's breathing stopped for just a second. He sat up, confused. What? Laneri wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were closed. I'm just asking. Herman swallowed. The room felt suddenly colder. You're not dying, he said quietly. Neither of you are. No one answered. But for the first time in months, Valerie allowed herself to fall asleep somewhere with a roof. Somewhere not locked from the outside. And Herman, watching her back rise and fall in the dim light, wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. The morning cycle on Tarnax, for it didn't bring sunlight. It brought static from the busted climate domes above and the faint hum of repurposed power lines waking from sleep mode. Herman Rayner stood near the sink, rinsing out a cracked water filter cartridge. The faint stutter of the pump echoed through the shelter. He hadn't slept much, not because of the noise, because of the weight. He glanced over his shoulder. Laneri was curled up on his cot, one leg hanging off the edge, her thumb pressed against her lip in her sleep. Valerie hadn't moved from her spot on the padded cloth. She was awake, eyes open, watching him silently from across the room. Not staring, just watching, like she was trying to decide what kind of man he really was now that the first night hadn't ended in threats or hands. You didn't eat much last night, Herman said, voice low. Valerie blinked slowly. Her voice was quiet, firm. I don't waste food when I don't know how long it'll last. He nodded once. Fair enough. She sat up, adjusting the shirt she wore, his shirt, tugging it down to cover her thighs, even though she was already wrapped in it like a second skin. Her hands looked steadier now, less curled in on themselves. But the bruises around her wrist bones were still visible, faded but not forgotten. There's more in the locker, he added. You and the kid can eat whenever. I already cleaned the floor again, she said, glancing at the corner. And the intake vent. I saw. That was it. No thanks. No warm moment. Just acknowledgement. That was all she was willing to give. Laneri stirred on the cot and blinked up, squinting at the overhead strip light that flickered to life. Is it still ours? She asked. Herman frowned. What do you mean? This place, she whispered, rubbing her eyes. Do we still belong here today? Or was it just yesterday? Valerie flinched at the question. Not visibly, but Herman saw her spine go stiff for half a second. She didn't say anything, just looked down. Herman stepped closer to the cot and crouched near the girl. You don't belong to anyone, he said carefully. But yes, it's still yours. As long as you need it. Laneri nodded like that made sense and slowly sat up, her hair a mess of white tangles. Can I clean your sink? She asked. Valerie opened her mouth to stop her, but Herman raised a hand gently. You can, he said, but not because you have to, because you want to. There's a difference. Laneri looked confused, but smiled anyway. As she padded barefoot over to the corner and began scrubbing the already mostly clean sink, Herman turned to Valerie. She doesn't understand what it means to stop owing people, does she? Valerie exhaled slowly. She's 5. All she's ever seen is me working to make someone let us stay another night. I don't think she believes safety exists without a price. Herman folded his arms. She shouldn't have to think like that. She shouldn't, Valerie agreed. But here we are. The silence between them stretched. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. Eventually, she stood, legs stiff, and walked over to the corner where a small pile of rags and cleaning tools sat. She selected a stiff brush and held it up. I'm not going to be idle. If that's a problem, say it now. He shrugged. I'm not stopping you. But this isn't a debt system. She stared at him a moment longer. Then she turned and knelt by the vent panels again. As she worked, Herman busied himself with rewiring a frayed backup cable on his fusion tap. The girl hummed to herself in the background. There was a strange stillness to the morning, the kind he hadn't felt in a long time. No alarms, no syndicate knockers at the door, no shouting from outside. Just maintenance and movement. It felt calm, but that calm cracked when he opened the side access panel to the outer relay box and found the mark. Painted in faded crimson, a small slash inside a triangle, burned into the metal. Syndicate slaver tag. Recent. Someone had been by. Maybe yesterday. Maybe last week. He closed the panel slowly, eyes narrowing. Inside, Valerie was now organizing a set of folded cloths into stacks. Laneri had taken apart a broken respirator and was poking the pieces on the floor. How long were you two on your own? Herman asked without turning. Valerie looked up. Too long. Anyone been looking for you? She paused. Not officially. Not the kind of people who fill out reports. Syndicate. She didn't answer. Because someone tagged my relay box. That means someone noticed you vanished. Now, she stood fully, walking over. We moved every few days. Kept to the trade alleys. Never stayed overnight in the same location twice. I avoided the auction lines. Laneri's too young. They don't like that. You belong to one of them? I belong to no one, she said sharply. But I cleaned for them. Fixed synth tiles. Patched suits. They didn't ask for names. But they'd notice if you left. She looked away. Probably. He nodded slowly, then turned, leaning back against the frame of the relay box. If someone comes, what do you want me to do? She looked up at him. For the first time, her expression cracked slightly. Exhaustion, tension, fear flashing all at once before she hardened it again. If they come, you don't owe us anything, she said. Just open the door and let them take us. That'll be easier. Laneri looked up from her play at that. No, Herman said. Not loud. Just final. Valerie blinked. If someone comes, he continued, we don't open the door. We don't give anyone anything. Not unless I say so. She stared at him. I'm not running a shelter, he said. I'm not rescuing anyone. But if you're here, then you're here. That means I protect what's mine. Her eyes narrowed slightly. So we are yours? In the sense that I don't abandon people who eat under my roof. Yeah, you're mine now. Get used to it. Valerie's chest rose slightly. She didn't argue. Laneri piped up. Can we have soap today? Herman looked at her, caught off guard. Soap? For the water bucket. Mama says I only get to use it on clean days. He smiled a little. Yeah, it's a clean day. The girl beamed. Valerie turned to her and said, under her breath, not so loud. Don't seem too happy. People might think we're lucky. Herman didn't say anything, but he noted that too. That afternoon, Valerie helped him strip down a piece of wall paneling from the old storage room and re-insulate a frayed heating coil. She didn't ask questions. She followed instructions exactly. Hands quick, eyes sharper than most mechanics he'd worked with. He found himself checking her posture, her balance, the way she leaned into tasks with perfect calibration, muscle memory from a life of work. She wasn't weak. She was just worn down. By nightfall, she was limping again. He gave her one of his spare boots, the sole ripped out and made into padding. She didn't thank him, but she wore it. When the lights dimmed and the heater sputtered to half power, Laneri curled into a tight ball near the wall. Herman rolled out a second blanket and gestured to Valerie to take the cot this time. She hesitated but didn't argue. When the shelter finally went quiet, Valerie's voice broke the silence. Why did you say yes? He didn't look at her, just laid flat, staring at the dim light on the ceiling. Because no one else did. Then he turned his head toward her and added, and I don't like the way she begged. Valerie blinked once, then turned away and whispered something in Zyrene. It sounded like thank you, but he didn't ask. The next morning started with metal. Herman's hands were buried in a stripped-down coolant unit he'd scavenged a week before, trying to rewire the thermal regulator before the whole damn coil seized again. His arms were already scraped up, sweat on his neck despite the chill, his breath visible each time the vent kicked offline. He didn't say much, he rarely did when working, but his ears tracked every sound behind him. Laneri was humming softly to herself, crouched under the table, sketching stars on the floor with the end of a dull bolt. Valerie was quiet. She had taken one of the unused rags and a water canister and was wiping the walls again, focused, mechanical. Every movement was purposeful, measured. But Herman could see her hands tremble slightly when she thought no one was watching. Why are you helping us? She asked without turning. He didn't respond right away. He crimped a wire casing, twisted a coupler in place, then said, You need help. That's not a reason. It's enough for me. Valerie stood. Her movements were slower today, her limp more pronounced. I'm not used to people doing things without wanting something. You'll adjust. She walked closer, arms folded across the loose fabric of a shirt she still wore. His shirt, tied again at the waist with a salvaged belt strap. She glanced at the pile of stripped parts he'd sorted near the heater. You used to be a contractor? He nodded. For what? Structural and systems integration. I worked domes, water power walls, whatever kept the place from falling apart. Why are you here? Because the contracts dried up, he said flatly. Because I didn't feel like dying for people who'd sell me for copper weight if I coughed too long. He set the coolant unit down and looked at her. What about you? What did you do before all this? I made homes livable, she said. Interior resonance calibrations, light diffusion, sleep field harmonics. I used to be brought in when people wanted to actually feel something in a place. And now I scrub out latrines that were built before I was born. She looked at him, and I keep my daughter from being noticed. There was a long silence. Laneri, without looking up, asked quietly, Are we going to stay here now? Herman met Valerie's eyes, and for once, she didn't look away. You can, he said. But what about the bad men? Laneri asked. The ones with the collars and the metal dogs. Valerie turned sharply. Don't talk about them. Herman lowered his voice. You've seen them recently? Valerie hesitated, then nodded. 2 days before we found you, she said. One of them saw me when I was trading off my last blanket for food. He said I'd be worth something if I cleaned up. Herman's jaw tightened. And I don't think they let people just walk away, she added. He stood and walked to the back panel of the shelter, pulled open the reinforced compartment behind the makeshift bunk. From inside, he took out a flat black case, set it on the floor, and opened it. Inside, a compact plasma cutter, an old model sidearm with an extra cell, 2 thermoblades, and a signal scrambler. Everything military issue. None of it legal anymore. Valerie stared. You were a soldier? No, he said, but I worked alongside enough of them. Helped wire their camps, fix their tools, and they left behind more than they realized. You've been preparing for something. No, Herman said, voice even, but I don't like being surprised. She nodded slowly. Laneri walked over and sat beside the weapons case, eyes wide. Can I hold the little one? Valerie snapped. No. Herman simply shut the lid and slid the case back into the wall. Later that day, Herman took Valerie outside for the first time since she'd arrived. They kept to the shaded maintenance ducts and broken service paths. She wore one of his older coats, sleeves rolled, front belted high to stay closed. Her legs were still bare except for the wraps, but she walked straighter, stronger. They scavenged a collapsed relay site together. He showed her how to spot wires with intact sheathing, how to tap a half-dead data module for coolant mapping. She listened carefully. Her hands were quick. When she stood on a crate to reach a fuse panel, he instinctively steadied her by the waist, then pulled his hand back just as fast. She didn't flinch, but she didn't acknowledge the touch either. I can teach you how to handle the wiring, he said quietly. Basic diagnostics, fuser control. It might help. You offer me a job? I'm offering you control. Over something. Anything. She nodded once. I'd like that. That night, Laneri drew pictures on one of the walls using a stick of old thermal chalk. Stars. A dome. A figure she labeled you. A smaller one, Mama. And a larger one, the Fixer. Why am I the Fixer? Herman asked. Because you fix stuff, she said. And when things break, you don't yell. Valerie sat nearby, her hands wrapped around a warm canteen. The heater buzzed behind them. The shelter smelled of metal, boiled water, and heat-treated food packs. Laneri turned toward him again. Can I ask something? Go ahead. If they come for us, do we run? Or do we hide? Valerie tensed. Herman met the girl's gaze. Neither. We stand ready. She nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. Later, when Laneri was asleep, Valerie stayed up. She stood in the middle of the room, staring at the ceiling like it might collapse. Her arms were crossed, but not in defense. More like she didn't know what to do with them now that no one was pulling at her, shouting orders or demanding favors. Herman watched her quietly from where he sat, cleaning the sidearm. I keep waiting for you to ask for something, she said. I won't. You could. I won't. She took a slow breath. You could say I owe you, that you let me stay, that you fed my daughter, that you kept us warm. He looked at her. You don't owe me. You never did. Then he added, but if you want to give something, give it when it's yours to give. Not when you're still trying to survive. Her throat moved once. That might take a while. I've got time. She walked past him, close enough that her bare arm brushed his shoulder, and sat down by the heater. I've got nothing left, she murmured. Then this is where you start over. He didn't touch her. He didn't move. But he didn't look away, either. The wind was stronger now. Outside the shelter's metal walls, it howled across the dead outskirts of Sector for like a warning, dry, stinging, filled with sharp dust that scraped against the hull of the old utility bay like sandpaper. Inside, Herman checked the outer relay nodes again. The syndicate mark on the access panel hadn't faded. If anything, it looked newer. They were circling. Valerie was folding a clean cloth with mechanical focus. Her movements had sharpened since yesterday, more precise, less hesitant. She no longer waited for permission to act. She wiped down the heating coil, adjusted the canisters by weight, organized food packets without a word. Herman watched her and saw something else returning, control. But behind her eyes, something still hadn't settled. I can't sleep anymore, she said flatly. I wake up before the lights come on. Habit, Herman asked. Fear. She didn't sugarcoat it. Places like this don't last. When they do, it usually means that someone's planning to sell you instead of use you. He didn't argue. You're not planning to sell me? No, even if someone offers a lot. He looked at her. No one's worth more than the peace they bring. Valerie glanced toward Laneri, who was on her stomach beside the heater, tapping two old circuit chips together like toys. The girl giggled softly, a sound Herman hadn't heard from her before. She thinks we're safe now, Valerie said. That scares me. Because hope's dangerous? Herman asked. Because it makes the fall worse. He returned to checking the power lines. Then don't let her fall. That afternoon, Herman took Valerie and Laneri down to the water processor. It was 2 levels below the outer district, in a collapsed filtration substation where the pipes still leaked drinkable runoff if tapped right. Most stayed away because the ceiling had partially fallen in and the light panels never worked. Valerie held Laneri's hand as they descended. She wore one of Herman's canvas coats again, her legs still bare, linen wraps tight. Her skin looked less dull now, less dry. The grime had faded from her shoulders. The curve of her back was visible again, not undernourished, not desperate. Just her. As they reached the substation, Herman pulled a crowbar from his belt and wedged open a floor grate near the back column. Cold steam rose from beneath. The sound of rushing water echoed faintly. He reached inside, twisted a coupling valve, and placed a bucket under the spout. The water trickled out, slow but clean. "We'll take what we can carry," he said. "This lasts us 5 days if we ration." Valerie crouched beside him. Her voice was steady. "How long will we be here?" "I don't know yet. If they come, if we fight, will you kill them?" "If I have to." She looked at him. "Do you think I'm weak?" "No, I feel weak." "Then feel it, but don't believe it." She stared at the water for a long time. Then she whispered, "They hurt me." Herman didn't respond right away. He kept his eyes on the valve, his fingers tightening it shut. "They try to make me forget what it feels like to be touched without pain," she said. "To speak without being told I was wasting someone's time. They want to take my worth and turn it into labor. They wanted to make me invisible, except when they needed something." Laneri wandered off toward a rusted wall panel and sat, quietly plucking bits of rubber from a busted conduit. Valerie went on, voice low, "And sometimes I think they succeeded." "They didn't," Herman said. "You're still here. I don't know who here is anymore." "Then let's figure it out," he said. "You, me, her. You're not dead yet, so you still get to choose who you are." Valerie's eyes were damp, but no tears fell. She stood, stepped away from him, and moved toward her daughter. She knelt, whispered something in Zyrene into Laneri's ear. The girl nodded, then hugged her tightly, little hands wrapped around her mother's waist. That evening, back in the shelter, Herman found Valerie in the far corner of the room, alone, seated against the wall, her arms wrapped loosely around her knees. She'd pulled off the coat. The shirt beneath had slipped slightly off one shoulder. Her hair was still tangled, but softer now, brushed out with her fingers. She looked up at him, then looked away again. "I used to be proud of what I was," she said quietly. "You still can be. Not like before." Her voice was tired. "Not after what they saw me as. Not after what I let happen to keep her safe." "You didn't let anything," Herman said. "I didn't stop it either. That's not the same." She looked at him again, this time directly. "I feel like I'm trying to rebuild a door that doesn't go anywhere." Herman stepped closer, crouched in front of her. "Then maybe it's not a door you need anymore. Maybe it's a wall." She raised an eyebrow. "To keep them out," he said. Her lips pressed together. She nodded slowly. Then her voice dropped. "If I stay here, really stay, I need to know you won't expect anything from me that I'm not ready to give." "I won't," he said. "But when you are ready, tell me. Don't wait for me to ask." She studied his face. Her fingers reached forward, hesitant, and lightly touched his wrist. "Just a second." Then she pulled back. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then stay long enough to prove yourself wrong if you have to." She let out a breath. "All right," from the cot. Laneri murmured sleepily, "Mama." Valerie stood and went to her. She knelt, stroked the girl's hair. "Go back to sleep, little star," she whispered. "You're safe." As the heater hummed and the lights flickered low, Herman leaned back against the wall. His eyes stayed open long into the night. Outside, in the dark, something moved near the collapsed checkpoint gate. Footsteps. A quiet signal blinked once, read. The syndicate hadn't forgotten, and neither had he. They came at dusk, not with trucks or noise, but with silence. 2 syndicate scouts, light-footed and lean, moved through the ruins like they'd done it 100 times before. Their faces were covered by matte filters, goggles dimmed for thermal scans. They carried restraint rods on their backs and static cuffs at their belts. They weren't here to make a scene. They were here to collect a product. Inside the shelter, Herman sat by the tool shelf, rerouting power from the backup cell to keep the heater steady through the night. He'd started locking the hatch 2 nights ago, not because Valerie asked, but because she didn't. That told him enough. Valerie was cooking near the makeshift burner, something simple from ration packs and rehydrated grain. Lineri sat cross-legged on the floor, playing with a broken comm chip, pretending it was a spaceship. 2 more days of supplies, Herman said without looking up. I'll head to the intake sector tomorrow. You both stay here. Valerie stirred quietly. I can come. Not yet. I can handle myself. You can, but I'd rather have you inside 1 more day, in case they start sniffing around. Valerie didn't answer, but her hand on the pot paused for half a second. Something's wrong, isn't it? She asked. Probably. She turned. What kind of wrong? He looked up. The kind where people who used to own things come looking when they realize they don't anymore. She didn't speak again after that. The knock came 20 minutes later. 3 slow taps. A pause. Then 2 more. Not random. Not desperate. It was a signal. Herman moved quietly to the wall locker, opened it, pulled out the case. Inside, the pistol and the plasma cutter. He holstered one, left the other. Get her behind the curtain, he said to Valerie, already standing. Valerie grabbed Lineri by the hand and disappeared into the wash corner. She didn't argue. She didn't hesitate. The door buzzed again. Herman opened the lock panel but didn't release the door. Through the outer cam port, he saw 2 men in reinforced scavenger jackets. Plain gear, neutral colors. Syndicate muscle. One had a data pad in hand. The other rested his gloved hand on a stun rod like he didn't care if he had to use it. Something you need? Herman asked through the speaker. Looking for a subject, the taller one replied. Valari species. Female. Domestic model. Escaped service contract last week. Traveling with a minor. You seen anything matching that? Not interested in your questions, Herman said. No one comes through here unless I call them. You're housing unregistered bodies. That's an offense under Section 19 of Colonial Salvage Law. I'm not under your jurisdiction. This site's decommissioned. Doesn't mean it's off limits. You didn't hear me, Herman said. There's nothing for you here. The shorter man leaned toward the camera. Look, you give her up, we leave you alone. We're not here to drag this out. She's syndicate property, not your fight. Herman leaned close to the speaker. She's not property. A pause. She's not yours either, the man said. Herman's tone changed, low, steady, cold. She is now. He hit the override switch, cutting the camera feed, and locked the outer seal. Then he turned, drew the pistol from his belt, and moved toward the side corridor where the access hatch led to the subcrawl duct. Valerie emerged from the curtain slowly. Lineri clung to her side, eyes wide. Do we run? She asked softly. No, Herman said. We don't run unless they breach. But if they do, Valerie, you take the girl, follow the secondary vent all the way to the east platform. There's a ladder shaft behind the collapsed pump chamber. Hide there. And you, I'll slow them. Valerie's eyes flickered with something hard. You'll die. Maybe. I don't want you to. He paused. That makes 2 of us. Outside, the scouts hadn't moved yet. They were waiting, probably for a 3rd unit to flank around and intercept if someone bolted out the rear. Inside, Herman barricaded the main hatch, reinforced the panel edges with metal sheeting, and sealed the vent he wasn't planning to use. Valerie came up behind him. Let me help. He turned to her. With what? She held up her hands. I can hold a weapon. I know how to cut power to a drone net. I'm not just a... He grabbed her wrist gently. I know what you are, and it's not something to be thrown away in a hallway for a few seconds of delay. She froze. He didn't let go. You're someone's mother, and you deserve to survive this. Her lip trembled just barely. She blinked hard. Then Lineri's voice came again, quiet but cutting. Mister, he looked down at her. Don't die. He swallowed. I'll do my best. 15 minutes passed. Then came the hiss of a breech rod powering up against the main hatch. Herman pulled Valerie into the back. Go. Now. No. Now. He kissed her forehead before she could speak, turned, and sealed the inner panel behind them. Valerie carried Laneri through the maintenance shaft, half-running, ducking under cables and over support beams, breathing hard. Laneri clung to her, her fingers hooked in her mother's belt. Behind them, far in the distance, a dull concussive thump rang through the shaft. The front hatch had failed. She didn't stop. Herman stood in the center of the shelter, holding the plasma cutter in one hand, pistol in the other. The two syndicate scouts came through the smoke, slow and steady, weapons ready. "Where is she?" the taller one asked. Herman didn't answer. They raised their rods. He fired first. The blast caught the taller one in the leg, non-lethal, but hard enough to drop him. The second lunged forward, swinging wide. They fought. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't tactical. It was dirty, close-range, brutal. Herman took a hit to the ribs, slammed the second man into the power conduit, then rolled, kicked, and fired again. He was bleeding from the temple when it ended, but he was still standing. Both scouts were down. He leaned against the wall, panting, lightheaded. Then he dragged them outside and locked the door behind him. 3 hours later, Valerie crept back through the shaft with Laneri asleep in her arms. She found Herman slumped by the wall, one arm tied in a makeshift sling, eyes half closed. She knelt beside him. "I told you not to die," she whispered. He smirked faintly. "Wasn't on the schedule." Valerie reached up, touched his cheek. Then, without fear, without obligation, she kissed him. Not a promise, not a reward, just a beginning. By morning, Herman couldn't move his left arm. The shoulder had taken the full impact of the shock baton. He sat at the edge of the cot, shirt off, bruises spreading across his chest like slow ink. Valerie stood over him with a salvaged med injector, checking the seal on a second-hand trauma patch she'd pressed his ribs. "I can do it," he muttered. "You can barely breathe straight," she said, calm but firm. "Hold still." She cleaned around the swelling, not gently, but not cruelly either. Her fingers were steadier now. When she pressed the patch into place and activated the coagulant foam, Herman winced hard but didn't complain. Laneri sat in the corner with a cracked datapad that barely held a charge, humming to herself and drawing on the back of an old ration wrapper. A child's imitation of normal. "She doesn't talk about what happened yesterday," Valerie said as she packed away the kit. "She shouldn't have to," Herman replied. Valerie sat down across from him, cross-legged on the floor. Her shirt was different now. One of Herman's old utility tops she'd tailored with strips of synth cloth to hug her better. She still walked barefoot, but her legs were cleaner, the wrappings tighter. She looked alive. Still guarded, still weathered, but alive. "They'll come back," she said. "They'll send better next time. Do you have a plan?" "I always have a plan," he said. "The real question is, do you want to stay?" Her expression shifted. "Because if you stay," he went on, "you're not just passing through. We build something here. We make a hold, and we defend it like it means something." Valerie didn't answer right away. Finally, she looked toward Laneri. "I haven't stayed anywhere more than 2 nights since she was born. She needs more than 2 nights. So do I. Then stay." She looked at him. "I already did. Over the next 2 days, everything changed." Valerie moved differently now. She no longer waited to be told what to do. She took charge of storage, resorted their supplies, fixed the cracked pipe above the sleeping alcove, and even helped reroute a heat exhaust loop so they could cook without blowing a fuse. Herman showed her how to fire the plasma cutter. Not just for tools, for defense. She was a fast learner. Her stance was a little off, but her hands didn't shake anymore. And Laneri started to laugh. Really laugh. They built a second cot together. Valerie insisted on it. "She needs her own space," she said. "Not a floor, not a corner. A space." Herman agreed. They used scrap panels, a salvaged insulation blanket, and some stubborn bolts that Valerie beat into shape with a wrench. When it was done, Laneri stood beside it and whispered, "Is this mine?" Herman nodded. "Yours." She ran her hands across the edge, gently. "Can I put my name on it?" He handed her a marker. "Only if you spell it right." She giggled and wrote a backwards L first. That night, the 3 of them sat around the burner, sharing heat and quiet. Valerie's legs brushed his under the table. She didn't pull away. Her voice was low. "They used to tell us that we weren't compatible. Biologically, emotionally. That Zyrini don't bond with humans. That our instincts are too different. You believe that? I used to. And now? She looked at him. Now I'm not sure if I'm healing or becoming something new. You're doing both, he said. She leaned in slightly. And you? I stopped pretending it was fine the moment I opened that door, he said. You two broke the quiet I'd been hiding in. She nodded. Good. Quiet's not living. He tilted his head. You ready to start? Start what? Living. She smiled. Not wide, not showy. Just a real one. Small, tired, beautiful. Yeah, she said. I think I'm ready. Later, after Laneri had gone to bed, Herman stood at the sink, washing out the used plates. Valerie came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Her head rested against his back. You've never asked me to stay, she whispered. You just made it possible. I figured you'd know better than I would if you were ready. She pulled back just enough to speak against his shoulder. Next time they come, we don't run. No, we fight. He turned to face her. And we don't hide afterward. No, this is ours now, she said. Not theirs. He kissed her then. No heat, no hunger, just clarity. Her hand slid up his chest over the bruises. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She just held him there, skin to skin, breath to breath, until it felt real. And when the lights dimmed, they stayed close. No distance between them. No fear of tomorrow. Only the quiet certainty of what they'd chosen. The wind died down 2 days later. The skies over Tarnax remained cloudless, gray with dust, and lit by the low flicker of malfunctioning orbital reflectors. But inside the shelter, inside the walls that once echoed with cold silence, there was warmth. Not just from a heater, but from the routines that had slowly become life. Laneri was playing with a makeshift doll she'd made from scrap cloth and wire ties. She had propped it on the small shelf beside her cot and was talking to it like it was a sibling. No, you can't eat all the biscuits, she whispered, scolding it. Those are for Mama. She works harder. Valerie stood at the counter, slicing open a sealed ration packet with one of Herman's utility knives. Her sleeves were rolled up, her shirt freshly laundered with boiled water and smelling faintly of thermal soap. Her hair was combed, tied back. She wore it that way now, not because she was hiding, but because she liked the way it felt clean and under her control. Herman adjusted the solar relay at the side panel, rerouting power through a new junction node. He had scavenged it that morning while Valerie kept watch. No one had followed him. No one had circled the shelter. The syndicate had gone quiet, but he knew better than to assume that meant peace. Still, they had something now. Not just safety, not just time, a beginning. He turned as Valerie approached him with a mug of warm CAF. She handed it to him, and when he took it, her hand lingered on his. You've stopped checking the door every hour, she said softly. He nodded. You've stopped flinching in your sleep. She tilted her head. I still wake up before the lights come on. I know. I hear you breathing. She smiled. Still watching me, human? Every night. Valerie leaned forward, kissed his cheek. It wasn't shy anymore. It was part of who they were now. I think I want to stay, she said. You already have. I want it to be official, she added. I want her to know it won't change tomorrow. They both turned to look at Laneri, who was now dancing the doll across the table, giving it voices and rules and pretend food. Herman stepped closer to the girl, knelt beside her. Hey, little one. She looked up at him with wide violet eyes. Mister, you can stop calling me that, you know. What should I call you? He glanced at Valerie. She gave him a quiet, nodding look of permission. You can call me Herman, he said. Or if you want, just Dad. Laneri didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then she smiled and whispered, Okay, but you still have to let me eat the last biscuit sometimes. He laughed. Valerie did too. And for the first time, it didn't sound like someone remembering how. That evening, they cooked over a steady flame, and Herman played an old recording on a cracked music chip he hadn't touched in years. Something instrumental, soft, slow, from Earth, maybe. It filled the space like it had always belonged there. Laneri slept early. Valerie tucked her in, brushing back the girl's hair and whispering something in Zyrene. A lullaby, Herman assumed. He didn't ask for a translation. Some things weren't meant for sharing. Some were meant to stay sacred. Later, when the shelter was quiet again, Herman and Valerie sat on the floor near the heater, shoulders touching. Her legs were curled beneath her. One of his shirts slipped slightly off her collarbone, and she didn't bother fixing it. "You were right," she said, eyes fixed on the low flicker of flame. "About what?" "That safety's not a place. It's a choice." He nodded. "And you made it." She turned to face him. "So did you." There was a pause. Then she spoke again, voice steady and clear. "I love you." He met her eyes. "I know." She frowned slightly. "That's all." He smiled, reached out, and placed a hand against the side of her face. "I love you too. But I already showed you that, didn't I?" She leaned into his touch. "Yes, but still nice to hear." Outside, the lights of Tarnax flickered in the dark. Inside, in a battered shelter carved out of forgotten metal and old regrets, 3 people slept in warmth and silence. Together, not alone. Not fugitives. Not survivors. A family. And for the first time in years, no one was coming to take anything away. Because this was home. It was quiet. Not because the world had stopped being dangerous, but because, for once, danger wasn't pressing at the door. A warm breeze filtered in through the reinforced vent shaft, stirred the edges of the thin cloth curtain that Valerie had hung over the entry. The light outside was pale, filtered through Tarnax 4's dust-heavy atmosphere, but inside the shelter it fell across the floor in soft lines. Dust motes swirled through the air like snow caught in suspension. Valerie stood barefoot on the metal floor near the wash basin. Her hair was damp, freshly rinsed with boiled water. It hung in loose waves down her back, the icy white strands catching the light in a soft sheen. She wore one of Herman's shirts again, this one newly patched by her own hand, tied up at the waist with a faded cloth strip. It hung just her upper thighs. Her long legs were bare, smooth and clean now, wrapped only in a few loose linen bands at the ankles for warmth. She was drying a cooking tin when Herman came up behind her and kissed her shoulder. He didn't say anything. He just rested his hands on her hips, grounding her in the moment, steady and warm. She leaned back into him without thinking, eyes closed, breathing slowing. "It's early," she said. "It's a day off," he replied. "We haven't earned one. We survived. That's enough." She turned in his arms slowly, facing him. He looked tired, but the kind of tired that came from peace, not battle. The bruise on his temple had faded to a dull yellow. His ribs were still wrapped, but he moved easier now. His shirt was half-buttoned, pants cuffed at the bottom. The power was working. The heater was steady. The water filter wasn't leaking anymore. Nothing was broken right now. "You shaved," she said, fingers brushing his jaw. "Noticed, huh? You look softer." He raised an eyebrow. "That a compliment?" She smirked. "I haven't decided yet." He leaned in, kissed her. No urgency, no tension, just the quiet permission of people who no longer had to ask. When they parted, she whispered, "I never thought I'd wake up in someone's arms again and not feel afraid." He brushed her hair back behind her ear. "I never thought I'd want to fall asleep with someone's leg wrapped around mine." Her eyes flickered with quiet mischief. "You didn't complain." "I still don't." They kissed again, deeper this time. Still slow, still calm, but with the weight of everything they'd carried and now put down. Then Laneri's voice echoed from the other room. "Mama Aya, the pan I left is stuck to the wall again." Valerie sighed into Herman's chest. "She glued something, didn't she?" "She's 5. You knew what this life came with." "I did." She pulled away, patting his cheek. "Come on, Dad. Let's go parent." Later that afternoon, the 3 of them sat outside on the short metal ramp that sloped down from the shelter door. The heat was manageable. The wind was low. The land stretched out in every direction, dead but not empty. Herman had rewired a broken portable screen into a solar sketch pad. Laneri sat in the middle, drawing stars and a lopsided version of their shelter. "This is us," she said proudly. "This is home." Valerie leaned into Herman's side, sipping lukewarm tea. Her arm rested over his. Her body pressed close, comfortably. She watched Laneri draw, eyes soft, focused. Every now and then, she reached over and tucked her daughter's hair behind her pointed ear. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked quietly. "I think we'll make it," he said. "You're not afraid anymore?" I am, Herman admitted, but not of being alone. She nodded. Me neither. As night fell, they sat inside again. The lights dimmed. The air cooled. The quiet returned. Valerie wore a blanket now, draped over her shoulders, loosely covering the shirt she still hadn't changed. Herman lay beside her on the cot they had begun sharing every night. Her bare leg draped across his. Their fingers were laced. Linary slept peacefully in her cot, curled against a warm pillow, the makeshift doll tucked under her arm. There was no music tonight, no talking, just breath and stillness, and the soft hum of something they hadn't had in a long time. Safety. Later, just before she drifted to sleep, Valerie whispered, "You saved us." Herman, eyes half closed, replied, "You let me." She rested her forehead against his shoulder. This is what I want." He kissed her temple. "Then stay. I'm not going anywhere." And with that, the light finally dimmed. Not in fear, not in retreat, but in peace.